Hello, everybody. This video is going to be over normative social influence. So, social influence is when others and their behaviors lead us to change our behaviors. This could include things like others' attitudes can lead us to change our attitudes. So, social influence is when the attitudes or behaviors lead us to change something about our attitudes or behaviors. Normative social influence is when the behavior of others convey to us normative information. They convey to us what others are doing. This leads us to behave in a way consistent with those behaviors. And it acts upon our motive to belong. We desire to be part of a group, or at least to not be rejected from a group. And so, because we have this desire to belong, when others are behaving in a certain way, that conveys to us that how it is they're behaving, or however it is they say they believe, conveys to us what people typically do or typically believe. It conveys to us what is normative. And because we have that desire to belong, we tend to behave in a manner consistent with that. Now, this video is going to be about normative social influence. So let me pull up my visual aid here. So again, we tend to want to belong. And so, because of that desire that we have to belong, we tend to behave in a manner that's consistent with what we think is normative. All right. And sometimes just the presence of others and them all behaving in a way that's consistent can make us feel compelled, or make us feel like we need to behave in a manner consistent with them. That's normative pressure. All right. It's the sense that we get, it's that feeling that we have that we should behave in a way that's consistent with everybody else. All right. Now, why is normative pressure effective at making us conform? Well, because, as we've already mentioned, we have that desire to belong. All right. But we also have a desire to be approved of. Right. We want to think that others approve of us and approve of what we're doing. We also have a desire to look competent. We have a desire to avoid doing anything or acting in any way that might make us feel incompetent. And you say, well, people do stupid stuff all the time. You're absolutely right. But usually they do it in a joking manner, in which it doesn't impugn anything about their competence. So a person can be fun-loving or joking and be competent. And people don't want to look competent. Or sorry, they don't want to look incompetent. And so when I say foolish, I don't mean like they're a goofball. I mean foolish in that they're incompetent. Okay, so people don't want to feel that way. And so because people want to belong, and because people don't want to seem incompetent, and because people want to be approved of, people will tend to behave, if they see everybody behaving in a way, they tend to behave in a manner that's consistent with that. Because the way that everybody else is behaving is the normative way to behave. And so again, for those reasons, we try to behave consistently with those norms. So, for example, in a very classic study, Solomon Asch did a study in which he had participants come in groups and make visual line length judgments. All right. So basically what he had, I think it was 6 participants come in at a time, and they were given 3 reference lines and a comparison line. And each participant was then asked to decide whether or not the comparison line was equal, which of the reference lines was the closest in length to the comparison line. So they then had participants one by one go through and make a judgment. Which of the reference lines was closest in length, or did they believe was closest in length to the comparison line? Now, here's the trick. What they didn't tell the participant is that 5 of the participants were actually Confederates, meaning they were stooges. They worked for the experimenter. They were just posing as participants, all right? And they further rigged the experiment so that the order in which the participants gave their answers was rigged such that all of the Confederates gave their answers before the real participant gave their answer. Now, there were 18 trials in which they had a new comparison line and reference lines. And on each of the trials, they would go through each of the participants and ask which of the reference lines they thought was closest in length to the comparison line. Now, on the first 6 of these 18 trials, the Confederates, the 5 individuals who were actually working for the experimenter, were told to give the correct answer. But on the remaining 12, the Confederates were all told to give the exact same wrong answer. And then the principal DV, the principal thing that the experimenters were looking at, was how frequently the real participant conformed to that incorrect answer. Now, what Asch found is that about 33% of the time, on average, 4 out of those 12 trials, participants conformed. All right, 72% of participants conformed on at least one of the 12. So we see that people are heavily likely to conform. But in this situation, everybody was pretty clear on what the right answer is. In fact, you can go watch videos of people performing this study, and you can see the look in the participants' eyes. They're almost looking at the other participants with complete disbelief. Like, how are they thinking that? So in this situation, when participants conformed, they weren't conforming necessarily because they actually believed the other 5, but they were conforming potentially because they didn't want to look foolish, right? Because again, if everybody's answering in a consistent way, maybe I'm not seeing something. Maybe I misunderstood the question. Well, I don't want everybody to know that I misunderstood that question. I don't want to look stupid. So I'm going to go ahead and answer what they did. All right. And so in Asch's study, we see a pretty good example of conformity due to normative social influence, right? The answer is clear, or at least the participant probably originally thought that it looked clear. And then when everybody else is giving an answer that seems wrong, in order to avoid making it look like they missed something or they're not catching something, they went ahead and conformed. So people in this study seem to be conforming due to normative social influence. Now, when is normative social influence more or less effective? So specifically, we're going to look at moderators. Again, a moderator is anything that increases or decreases an effect size. All right. So basically, what makes people conform more or less because they want to belong, because they don't want to look foolish? Well, social impact theory offers us at least 3 variables that can moderate whether people conform because they want to belong. One of these is the strength of the relationship we have with those to whom we're conforming. So if that group, if the people that we're conforming to or that are behaving in a certain way are very important to us, then the chances of, so if they're very important to us, then that relationship is pretty strong. In that situation, any influence that those individuals have on us is pretty strong. When that influence is strong, people conform more. So we conform to groups that are very important to us more because we want to belong. All right. Again, the group's important to us. So it makes sense that our desire to belong would lead us to conform to those groups that are important to us. All right. Also, groups that are immediate, meaning they're very close to us. They're close in proximity. All right. If we never see a group, we might say that we're a member of a group, but we never see them. We hardly ever talk to them. We're certainly very rarely around them. If they're not very immediate, if they're not very close, then our likelihood of conforming to them plummets. All right. But if they're right there, they're seeing you, you talk to them, they're probably going to hear about what you did, then in that situation, they are very immediate. They are very proximal. And so in that situation, you're more likely to conform to them because you want to belong to them. All right. Another factor predicted by social impact theory is the size of the group. So the greater their number, the bigger the group, right, the more likely we are to conform. But if it's only a couple people, chances of us conforming, the smaller the group, the less likely we are to conform. Another factor that predicts whether or not we'll conform because we want to belong is the importance of being right. All right, so Barron and colleagues conducted a study in which they had participants perform an eyewitness memory task. What they did, at least for part of the study, is they showed participants a video of a crime. And they showed the participants a picture of, showed the participants the perpetrator for 5 seconds. Now that doesn't sound for very long, but let's feel, just so you get an idea of 5 seconds, let's feel 5 seconds. There you go, 5 seconds, all right? I was doing the Mississippis in my head, so it may not be exactly 5 seconds. But the point is, 5 seconds when all you're doing is staring at something is a long time, all right? You get a good look at something. So in this situation, participants saw the perpetrator, all right? Then participants had to do a lineup task. So they had to choose which of a number of people had committed a crime. Now, in a situation much like Asch's study, participants had to do this eyewitness testimony with other people. Okay. Now, Barron and colleagues also manipulated how important being right was. In the high importance condition, they said that they were trying to establish norms for nationwide eyewitness identification tasks. All right, so they were trying to gather national data that would actually be used in like court cases and such. And they added the additional incentive in which the most accurate person would get paid a certain amount. In the low importance condition, they told them they were doing, this was the first examination in eyewitness accuracy, and they were just trying to see how well people did, right? So in the high importance condition, there's a lot of stakes. In the low importance condition, there's almost none, all right? Well, what did they find? Well, what they found is that in this condition where everybody saw the eyewitness, right? When given a chance to identify the perpetrator, participants conformed more when it wasn't important to be right. But when it was important to be right, in the high importance condition, participants conformed less. They still conformed a little bit, but not as much as they did when it wasn't important. So when it's important to be right, conforming because we want to belong drops. But this isn't always the case. When it's important to be right, conforming for other reasons still happens. But in this video, we're just talking about normative social influence. So in general, when we're conforming because we want to belong, when it's important to be right, we conform less because we want to belong. All right. Another thing that leads us to conform less because we want to belong is when we've been in a group for a while and we've demonstrated ourselves to be a good compliant member of the group, we develop something that researchers call idiosyncrasy credits. All right, basically, by being a member of the group, a good, hardworking member of the group for so long, we convey to the group, hey, I'm one of you. I'm one of you. I'm out for your benefit. All right. So, because you establish a reputation of being a member of the group, when you deviate from the group tends to be more tolerant of that. All right. They tend to be more tolerant of you working outside the box. So people who have been in a group longer are able to, they can conform less because they want to belong to that group. Because essentially they've already established, hey, I'm one of you and I want to be one of you. All right. Also the presence of allies. All right. When we have a friend who also doesn't conform, that increases the chances that we ourselves will not conform. So for example, they've replicated Asch's study, but included a condition in which one of the Confederates gave the right answer. And in those conditions where at least one of the Confederates gave the right answer, conformity plummeted. All right. So when do we conform more? When do we conform more because we want to belong? We conform more because we want to belong. We are influenced by normative social influence more when the group that we're conforming to is an important group. So the connection between us and that group is strong. When groups are close to us, the group that we're conforming to is close to us. When the group that we're conforming to is big. When it's not important to be right. When we've demonstrated that we're a good member of the group and we've developed idiosyncrasy credits, and when we have no allies. Okay, so we conform more because we want to belong when the group's important, when it's close, when it's big, when it's not important to do the right thing, and when we don't have any idiosyncrasy credits. You know, another way, and when we don't have an ally. Another way to phrase that piece of idiosyncrasy credits, think about when you have just joined a new group of friends, right? Are you more or less willing to go out on your own? So you know, first year in college, right? you're meeting people for the first time. They all want to go to a particular burger joint. You've never really cared for that place. You don't necessarily dislike it, you just don't care for it. But all of them decide to go. Well, if you decide to, no, I'm going to go off to this place instead, that puts you in more unstable ground because you don't have those idiosyncrasy credits. But now let's say you're a senior and you've been with this group of friends since your freshman year, and now they all say, hey, let's go to this burger joint. Now you're a little bit safer when you say, I think I'm going to go to this other place. I'll meet up with you later. All right? Because now you've developed more idiosyncrasy credits. You developed more clout in the group. All right, guys, that's it for this video on normative social influence. As always, if you have any questions, send them my way. If not, I hope this video is helpful, and I will see you all later on.